Hey there Wargamers, Austin here with Death Ray Designs, and here on the 8th day of Christmas, we're going to talk about color theory. So in today's video, we're going to go over some of the basics of color theory. We're going to keep it really simple, but honestly, that's all you're going to need to know to paint some decent terrain. So this set over here is a really simple scheme. We're using green as our primary, black and gray as our secondary, cream as our highlight color, and then we have red as our spot highlight. So those four colors together make up this color scheme. The two in the middle, the cream and the gray, are both very neutral colors. So they'll go with almost anything. They're kind of like fillers, but they add definition to the piece, and they also, depending on where those colors are, they can bridge that piece of terrain with the mat or other pieces that you put next to it. So if you're completely not in the know about any color theory, let's dig into the surface level. So if you've got a rainbow sort of stretched around a circle, you've got colors that are exactly opposite each other on that, and those are called complements. You've got red and green. We always associate with Christmas colors, but one of the reasons that we use them as Christmas colors is because they work together so well. You look at pretty much any other combination of colors from directly across the wheel from each other, you're going to see that they work perfectly together in lots and lots of things, whether it's sports teams or different factions in war games or brand colors from your favorite companies. They're almost always going to be some sort of complementary or complementary adjacent kind of color. So if you're not using complementary, not directly across the wheel from each other, you might be using something called a triad. So in this circle of colors that we have, you pick any color on the wheel, and then you go 120 degrees, and then 120 degrees, and the colors that you started on and the two that you found are equidistant, basically making a triangle inset in this circle. And those three colors are going to be a triad. They're kind of like a complement, but now you've got a third different color that works together pretty well. So let's look at the set. Our primary color on this one is gray, which is, once again, very neutral. Our secondary color is cream, again, also pretty neutral. It's a little warm, but it's there. Our accent color is orange. So we've got all of these orange accents here, and our spot color, we've got some little sci-fi palettes at the bottom there that are green. So orange and green are 120 degrees away from each other, and the third color on the other side is purple. So if we wanted to add another color to this, it'd be really easy to add a few little purple accents. So let's say we decided that instead we wanted to make these purple or make our little drop crates purple. They would work really well in this scheme. And once again, keeping a lot of this terrain set a neutral color means that it'll blend together with either other terrain that you've already painted or pretty much any mat that you put it on. In fact, looking at these two schemes together, if we didn't have these bright oranges and greens and we had maybe red instead, it would fit perfectly together. Obviously, some terrain is going to stylistically, the actual physical structures of it aren't going to look great together, but this is a situation where this is a pretty multi-purpose terrain set that could be used for high-tech sci-fi stuff like Infinity or even Mercs, or pretty much anything small-scale skirmish that you're going to want to move your models in tight spaces for close combat, all the way into Gothic sci-fi like 40K, where yes, this is much more appropriate and fits with the aesthetic more cleanly, but there's also tons of other more high-tech sci-fi aspects, and on top of that, you can just add bits or do other modifications to make it more in line with the universe. So, with those things in mind, let's actually do a real-world example. Let's say we have a terrain set and we want to make some scatter terrain to go with it. So we've already sort of established our color scheme, and now it's time to add some scatter to really break up the table. So let's put some of that information to use. We've got our Killing Grounds Imperial Firebase set that we've already painted in this sort of yellowy orange color and grays and blacks and a little bit of rust. And we've also got some unpainted scatter terrain that we want to go with it. So we need to choose some colors to paint these in so that we can use color theory to figure out what's going to work best. So we've laid out some colors and picked out which color schemes we're going to use on each one. So our color triad that we're going to use to complement our orangey yellow color over here is going to be kind of a blue-green on the air recycler and a more burgundy sort of color for the crates. So we've also got some other colors that we're going to add to tint them a little bit differently. I've also got my trio of white, gray, black, just because those are inevitably useful for something. So much like our other projects, the first thing we're going to do with our airbrush is we're going to do a zenithal. So we're going to be spraying white from the top so that we create some natural highlights and shadows before we put any other paint down, so that the paint over top of it that is somewhat translucent will show brighter and whiter on the white parts and darker and more shadowy on the black parts. Just keeping at a consistent high angle here. Trying to only really hit the upward facing surfaces in this initial highlight. So once we have this to this point, we can turn it just a little bit and hit some of the areas up near the top a little bit more, just so we capture some of that definition. I just want to accentuate maybe the fade from here down. So we're a little brighter up here, a little darker down here. Now we can also do some more accentuating by maybe making the center of this a little bit brighter, maybe the middle of each of these little sections, like maybe these sections are a little brighter than those, so we get some interesting fading going on here. So let's do some of that. So now you can see it's really bright in the middle of that, but it gets darker towards the edges. So let's do that for all of them. And then up top, let's try to add a little bit of brightness in the center. Okay, and maybe we'll copy the same pattern from down here up top. So let's pick something to be a little brighter. I think these flat ones would be good. So there we go, we got a little bit extra pop of brightness there. Just even out the rest of these. Okay, so there we go. If anything, I think we could probably go around the top edge of the jar and maybe hit just a little bit more just to really make that pop. Now on these guys, we're going to do the same sort of treatment. So a little bit generally from the top on both of these. I'm going to come down the sides just a little bit. We don't want to leave anything really completely black, just because that's going to really be difficult to see any color on top of. Okay, so we kind of got them grayed. Let's go a little bit brighter on top. Okay, let's come from the other angle just so we get some on the other side of the raised edges here. Woo, blowing around. Okay, so now in the middle, let's get a couple little hot spots right there in the middle of those panels. Okay, and right there in the middle of that. A little more there, get a little more intense. Okay, looking good. Let's look at it all around. I feel like we could get just a touch more on the sides up near the top. Still want to leave a lot of darkness at the bottom there. This one's a little tougher just because it's really short. Okay, looking good. So now on this piece, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to actually put a horizontal stripe all the way around the tank here by putting some paint down now and then putting masking tape over it and then finishing the paint job. And when we peel it off, it'll be the color that we spray now. Because this kit in particular, the Blacksite X air recycler, is got a plastic jar in the middle, we can actually just remove that whole footer section. We don't have to worry about overspraying onto it. In fact, it'll be really easy for us to just paint this entirely separately without having to worry about doing a whole lot of masking. So I'm thinking about having the stripe right up against this ring right here. And we'll be using, I think this is 1/4 inch tape, so it'll be somewhere about like that. And I want to try to match the color of the stripe to the beige sections on the original terrain. So we're going to start off with ivory and then shade with a little bit of cracked leather. Actually, it might be better to put the cracked leather down first and then build up some of the ivory on top of that. So let's actually go for that. I'm going to try not to go completely overboard spraying the paint everywhere, because we want to only put it down essentially where we're going to put masking on. So here we go. Thin layer, thin layer, thin layer. Just working slowly around. With this, we'll just keep circling it until we get the desired shade. I think we're getting pretty close at this point. All right, so there's our brown. We're going to switch over to our ivory now, and we're going to cover up most of this, but I kind of want to make a transition from ivory to brown right where it meets up with that ring. Instead of washing this out completely, let's just basically spray out the remainder in the cup, and then we're just going to dump the ivory in on top of it. When you're doing colors that are supposed to be blended or mixed together like this, it's not always 100% necessary unless you need that other color to be like the pure color to wash out. Just get rid of the excess paint in the cup. I'm going to add a little bit of water, since this is not a pre-mixed airbrush paint. It's just a regular Vallejo model color. I'm just going to mix that water in. And the color that we've got in the cup is essentially still ivory. Okay, here we go. I'm just trying to stay up near the top of where that tape is going to land for now. So we're back around to where we started. So let's carefully add some more here. And if you're unsure about where that's going to land on the taped off area, keep your tape on hand. You can see, yep, we're hitting right there at the edge. So we're really just trying to cut that edge in with this ivory color. You don't want to go too fast and get it runny. Thin coat, thin coat. It may be hard to see that paint is actually going down anymore, just because I'm kind of hitting the same area again. I really want it to be a more intense ivory. So now we're going to kind of cover up a little tiny bit of that brown at the base. I just want to sort of unify the color, but we don't want to completely cover it up and kill our nice little shadows. All right. Whoop. All right, so this is perfect. We're gonna go ahead and put the tape down as soon as this dries, and we'll start on the next color. So, trade secret, actually not that secret. You don't want to put just straight painter's tape onto a model. Like with Frisket film, it's really a low tack adhesive. It's not gonna pull your paint off, but if you're using painter's tape on most acrylic paints, unless it's like really, really, really dry, or you've put a clear coat on top of it, there's a possibility it might peel paint away. So, pretty much any kind of natural fiber clothing, put it on your jeans, put it on your hoodie, put it on whatever, as long as it's not like a rain jacket or something. You should get a little bit of lint off the back of it and take some of the sticky with it, so that now when we put it on our model, it's not going to pull the paint off. Okay, got it started. I'm going to try to keep it really close on that edge. Now this bottle is slightly tapered, so we're going to have to be careful to really burnish down the top edge. One other thing that I like to do when I'm taping stuff off is just take that little tiny end piece here and fold a corner over, just so that it's easier to pull back up when you're done. I'm going to try to make sure to position that just so that it's perfectly in line, and then we're going to go around the edge I'm gonna push down all those sides so we don't have any places where you could get underspray paint coming up under a little wrinkle in the tape. So I'm sure that Minitaire or somebody else makes a blue-green, but I don't have it on hand, so we're gonna make our own. But if you're mixing your own colors for something like this, make sure that you mix enough. You don't wanna try to go back and match it. So don't waste a ton of paint, but at the same time, don't be stingy and only mix like a handful of drops. I always feel like I put a ton of paint in here and it's barely ever a significant portion of the bottle. So let's mix it up and see what we got. Okay, probably added a little too much blue. So we're gonna go back and add a little more green. Now I got this really nice sort of mossy blue-green color. Now, if we had been using a really extreme color for our stripe, we may want to have gone back and sort of re-primed this section again so that we didn't get any funky bleed through from the paint below. This paint we're putting on is fairly thin, so you're gonna get a really translucent effect with it, which is why we did all that zenithal pre-highlight stuff. We want to take advantage of that best we can. So we're not going to put on, you know, coat after coat after coat, but I do want to make sure that we get a nice even coat over everything. All right, I think we're pretty much there. So now let's move on to our next step. So thinking about the bottom here, I want to preserve these highlights that we did, but I also kind of want it to be a darker gray color as opposed to this really hot, bright white centers that we did. So I've mixed up some FW ink. This stuff is super duper opaque. You've probably seen me use it in at least one other video if you watched this series thus far. It is like crazy opaque. So you want to thin it down, and Justin was actually just asking me a second ago why I didn't just cut it with water and I used matte varnish instead. And it's just so that we keep the right viscosity. If you add water, it's just gonna run everywhere. You're gonna either have to do it so slow that it's gonna be mind-numbing, or you can use this and it'll go on kind of like a ghost tint or like a candy coat. So we'll see if this works. All right, okay, so that's actually working just like I had planned. So you can see it's, okay, between there and there, that's really starting to tone that down and get a much nicer gray. I'm really digging that. Oh, that's super cool. All right, so that was like a half a drop. I basically just touched the inside of the color cup with the dropper from the FW black ink, and then probably put in like 10 to 15 drops of that matte varnish. You use probably any old matte varnish. But yeah, actually, I'm loving that. A little bit of dry brush, and that's totally done. Okay, I liked the way that that worked so much that we're gonna do the same thing on top, because I think having the basically bookended with that same gray tone is gonna look really cool. So let's just do this sort of honeycomb thing at the top. And we're just doing an even coat. I'm not even really doing a whole lot of fancy shading at this point, because we did all of the fancy shading at the beginning. Almost got away from me. Okay, so I don't want to overdo it, but I think that's looking pretty good. I think on our next step, we're probably going to try to black out the underside so that we get a good separation between this and that. And we're just going to have to be really careful with the black not to get a whole bunch on the top of that. We probably could mask it, but that rounded lip is probably going to be a pain. Ooh, actually, you know what? Let's put a piece of tape around here and we'll incorporate that bevel into the underside of that. That sounds like a better idea. So I've got some more tape. I got some of the wider stuff, and I want to try to find an edge here that I can line up to consistently and try to get this on here in line with that curve. I'm going to just try my best to keep it consistent, and you may find yourself, if you're doing this, having to pick it up and put it down a few times just to get it generally in the right spot. I'm also applying a lot of pressure here because I'm trying to like get it to curve against the taper of the jar. So that can take a little bit of pressure. Okay, so here you can see I haven't matched back up again. So I know that I've sort of wandered a little bit, so I'm gonna back off a little bit. I'm gonna come back in. Okay, there we go. Now we're right on top of it. We can tear this off and do our little fold. And I think that we have consistently overlapped the other piece of tape, but if you hadn't, you could just come back with a third piece of tape to cover that completely. So now our areas down here are well protected. We're gonna do black under here, and we're gonna do black on this ring, and then some dry brushing at the end. Let's go ahead and get ready for that blackout. So just checking up the FW ink, and we're gonna load in like a couple of drops. This is one that you can be stingy with because it will go a long way and you'll get a lot of coverage. So let's get to it. Okay, so I'm gonna try not to get any up on this edge, but if we have a little bit of transition here on this toothed piece, that's gonna be okay. Mostly I'm just trying to get in between these slats and get a little bit of black on all those parts. Whew. That is some strong, strong black. Now I realize we've still got like kind of a lip of green there. We're gonna come back in a second from the other angle and try to tidy some of that up. Okay, so now I think we're pretty good on all those slats. Now we want to aim for the top surface of this MDF plate and that little crevice between the plate and the top of the jar. I'm kind of just trying to go like one little segment at a time. Ooh, okay, so I accidentally hit up here, and I'm just gonna try to wipe away some of that, but no biggie. If it was really bad, I'd probably just weather over it and call it a day. If it was really a big problem, you could always go back and repaint it, but I like my terrain war-torn and nasty. I think we're back around to the beginning now, so just gonna do a quick check and make sure there's nothing real obvious that I've missed. And we're gonna flip it over, and we're gonna get this, this ring at the bottom too, because I think that's gonna really add something to it. So now we're gonna have this interesting sort of layer cake effect where we've got gray at the very bottom, then a black ring, and then a beige ring, and then a green tank, and then back up to essentially a black cap with a gray top. Even with this like pretty much all completely assembled, we're able to get a lot of separation just with two pieces of tape and the angle that we're painting at with the airbrush. Now it's time to unwrap our presents. So let's see how we did. All right, so here's our green. It's looking pretty good, nice clean line. And see this beige cream color. Oh man, I love that color combo. Seems very nautical maybe? I don't know, I'm digging it though. Okay, so we got that, we got our base that this screws onto. Kind of reminds me of some kind of like buoy or something. Okay, so we have this, and now it's gonna do a little bit of dry brushing to finish this. I think that we're gonna use the same ivory again, because I think that'll look good on pretty much everything. The only thing it probably won't actually really hit at all is the green, and that's fine by me because I don't think it really needs any dry brushing. We're just gonna try to hit some of the details. So I'm gonna put a little bit out on the board here. So one thing that it took me a while to get under control when I was first starting to paint is dry brushing. You can go overboard really quickly. So I've got my brush loaded up with a good bit of this ivory paint, and now we need to take most of it back off. Other things to remember when you're dry brushing is you want your brush to actually be dry. If you just wash it in the last couple of minutes, don't use it, grab a different one, or wait for it to dry. So really trying to scrub out as much of this as I can into this paper towel, because when done right, dry brushing is a very subtle art. You don't want it to leave streaks on anything. We're gonna try to attack some of this detail down here first, and we're gonna be coming down because we want it to simulate where light's gonna catch. All right, so that's still looking a little bit chalky. I'm gonna scrub again, try to knock any of that off. Let's test it on our hand. Okay, so it doesn't look like we got a lot of chalk coming off now. Okay, so you can see we got these nice crisp lines right there on the edges of those. That's what we're looking for. We just want those lines to really help break up the detail and let you see all that stuff that we just put paint down on. So a lot of this is very subtle transitions and things, and even just solid color fields. So when you're doing this, it's like, if you do it well, it's almost like cheating. You can get stuff that's almost as good as even the best edge highlight with this if you take your time and be patient. It doesn't have to be a nasty chalky mess like, you know, probably the first time any of us did this. So I'm gonna try to go against the edges here so we can see those edge pieces too. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's try to get under here just a little bit. We don't wanna overdo it. We do wanna have just a little bit of definition there just so that it doesn't look like a mess. Okay, so I got a little streak here on the top of that black. Before it sets up completely, I'm gonna wipe it away just so we're not leaving a whole bunch of really nasty streaks. Okay, so let's flip this over. I'm not necessarily gonna spend a lot of time on the underside here, but I do think that having just a tiny bit of an edge is gonna look good. Okay, so there's that spot we accidentally hit with the black. Once we do that, actually blends in pretty well. All right, let's get the top. Here's the fun part. You just gotta have to go at this a bunch of different angles. You got details kind of sticking out of every which way. So we've got our crates that we did the zenithal on before, and we've got our sort of burgundy color that we picked out previously. I had also picked out some other weird sort of highlight colors, but you know what? This, what is this, Fantasy Games Scale 75 paint. I kind of like the idea of trying to use this yellowy orange on top of the red to see what kind of highlights we can get with that. This is really close to the color that we used on top of the actual terrain. So let's see what we can get. So I'm thinking that we need to put this down first, which is our more or less our shadow color, and then we might actually go back over with a slight white zenithal on top of this before we put this yellowy color down. That said, I think that we stand to discover a really cool transition if we transition these directly one into the other. Maybe we just go a little light on top with the maroon color, and so that we've got a little bit of room to still see some of that color mix on the model. If we don't like it, we can try to isolate it a little bit more with a secondary zenithal and come back with the yellow, or just cover it back up with the maroon and call it a day if it's looking real weird. So let's check it out. So let's start on the sides here. Since we were talking about having, let's get that out of the spray zone. So we were talking about having maybe the top be a little bit more lightly coated. Let's start with the sides and bottom. So you can see the transition here where it's nice and dark at the bottom and it gets a little paler at the top. But I think that we ought to ease off even more than that maybe for the top. Okay, so let's see if we can do this where we're gonna hit the perimeter. Let's turn it as we're going here. Woo, trying to get away from me. All right, so we got that. Maybe I'll come right down the middle with this too. But I'm thinking maybe we leave it with a bunch of the white showing through so that if we put the yellow on, that it just shows up a little better. So I think we still have some like absolutely bald white places in here. Let's at least get a light coating on top. I think that's probably gonna serve us well just so that we don't have any like super, super bright yellow spots. Okay, I think that's pretty close. Let's do the same on these. So with the peanut butter, that's the name of the color, I'm just gonna put some of that into, this is actually thin enough. I think that we don't really need to thin it too much. I don't have a ton of experience with the Scale 75 paints, but I've got a bunch of them here in the studio, and I need an excuse to use them because they look really cool. I'm not gonna clean out my airbrush again. We're gonna leave some of the maroon in there so that we get kind of a transition even in the color cup. I don't know. I'm getting a little afraid that this might look weird, so I keep dialing it back step at a time so that I'm not doing anything too crazy. But That's actually looking kind of cool. And, okay, so we've kind of got this transition going here where we still see the maroon on the sides and we got a lot of yellow on top. This isn't a finished product yet. I think that we still got some stuff to do, and I think that it might involve going back to the maroon, but in the meantime, let's make this one match. All right, so I've loaded back up with more of that brick red, the maroon color, and I just think that we need to punch the shadows a little bit more because in the end, we want this to be more purpley. So let's lean into that some more. And we can also come back in with some of that nice black ink that we used in the air recycler to give us a little bit of shadow right at the bottom. I think that'll do some nice things for us. So I'm gonna do a little bit of angling trick here. So we're gonna try to skate right across the top and leave those recesses alone. We'll see if it works with this, but I'm coming in at a really sharp angle here. I'm trying not to get a ton of it sticking to the surface in those recesses. So I want to leave some of that still, that nice yellowy color. Okay, so we still got some of these transitions happening in here. I think that it would be nice to get some more of the burgundy right down the center. So let's try to do that cleanly. Okay. And we're just gonna sort of trace the outsides and try to leave some of that yellow right in the middle. Okay, so I know that we've toned this down a ton, but I am liking this a lot better now than previously. I do like the inclusion of that yellow tone that helps tie it back and make references to the original piece of terrain. But there we go. Okay. I'm liking where that's going, and we can do a little bit of extra accenting with dry brushing and that black ink technique. So let's do this to the other one real quick, and then we'll be back for some dry brushing. Just gonna try to hit all these edges. We got lots of 3D detail on the sides of these to grab that dry brush paint here. Just in case you didn't know, these are actually from the bolt hole line, so if for whatever reason you're looking for them on the site, that's where they are. I really like them. They have sort of replaced our old trunk models, which were admittedly kind of time consuming to put together. And these ones go together much faster, and I really like them. They're also chunkier, so you get some good line of sight blocking stuff out of just like a couple of them. So I've also mixed up a bunch of that, that black tint that we used on the air recycler, and we're going to use that right there at the bottom to give us a little bit of extra darkness on the side. Maybe we'll hit a couple spots on top, but mostly I just want to give it a little extra definition and darken it up some. I'm just going to try to aim right at this edge, maybe even a little bit off, just so that we have a little more control at the beginning and we don't accidentally flood the side of this. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit of darker color going on there as we tint that down. Okay. I'm liking how that's looking compared to that. It's just a little bit darker. Just adding a little bit each time. All right, I like the way that's looking. Let's do it on the small one, and then we'll come back and maybe do a little bit on the top of that big one. Okay, and this one you gotta be really careful on because there's not a whole lot of edge room to get a good transition in on. It is doable, but you just gotta be careful. Okay, so back on this guy, let's figure out, we like the brighter middles here, but I'm thinking maybe we try to trim in a little bit around those edges. So let's see, with this being a really thinned down version of that ink, I'm feeling a little bit bolder. Okay, so that really darkened this down, and I think that it really made the centers of those look a little bit brighter. Maybe we'll do a little strip down the middle. Yeah, okay, all right. I think that we're getting a little bit more contrast there. Yeah, I think that's looking nice. And with our sample pieces of scatter terrain done, that really locks in our color scheme. I'm really digging this color triad with the original yellow orange, the maroon color on the gear crates, and the teal on the air recycler. I gotta say, I can't get enough of that teal. It looks really great on its own, and it looks even better next to the orange on the original stuff. So, more things that you could do with this at this point. You could add some weathering to the gear crates or to the air recycler, and the air recycler's side is an excellent place to use an airbrush stencil. Weathering and airbrush stencils, we've covered both of those in previous videos in the 12 Days series. You should check those out. We're also gonna have another one coming out tomorrow. I hope that you've enjoyed hanging out for this more casual style tutorial. I really enjoyed doing it this way, and I hope you did too. You can also check out all of the products and supplies that we used to make these pieces of terrain and everything else in the series over at deathraydesigns.com/12days. Go check it out. There's special pricing through the end of the event, so do yourself a favor and pick some up while they're cheap. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Tune in tomorrow. Till then, happy wargaming. Here we go.
I just went up and it was just way too far in.
Oh, my terrain. I make these.